One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, my friends. It's Sam Jacobs, host of the Sales Hacker Podcast. That's what you're listening to. I am the host of this show, which I just said. I'm also the founder of Revenue Collective. We're building a very wonderful global community of revenue executives and leaders at companies that are growing quickly all over the world. As of this recording, we just signed up our first person in Minneapolis. We've recently added people in Berlin, Tel Aviv, Paris, Oslo, and Barcelona. So it's a global movement. We're super excited about it. You can LinkedIn message me if you have any questions. But today, we are here to talk about David Zwerin and our interview with him. He's the head of field operations for TripActions. They are a fast-growing company, quickly approaching 100 million, backed by all the big names, including Lightspeed and Andreessen. They've raised massive amounts of money, and they went from 100 people to 700 people over the last 15 months. And David talks about that incredible growth story in our conversation. We also dive deeply into what is operations, what are the metrics that you need to measure, what does it all mean, how do you figure out demand generation and forecasting and all of that good stuff. So it's a great interview. Before we get into that interview, we want to thank our sponsors. We've got two sponsors on the show today. The first is Conga. Conga is the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite. With Conga, you can simplify documents, automate contracts, and execute e-signature so you can focus on accelerating sales cycles and closing business faster. Go to go.conga.com/saleshacker for more information. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale. From automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best, Outreach has your back. Now let's listen to David Zwerin from TripActions. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome back to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We are so excited today to have David Zwerin. He is the head of field operations at TripActions. And first of all, his background in startup land, as well as what he's been working on at TripActions and his perspectives on how to scale and really maintain the right level of growth for a revenue organization from the perspective of somebody in operations. So David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So we like to start with your baseball card. We know your name. We know your title, head of field operations. We may not know what TripActions does, and forgive us for offending you if that's the case, but tell us what the company does.
Yeah, TripActions is a revolutionary business travel platform, and it's really the choice of enterprise organizations out there. So we help you enable you to build and manage and scale kind of a world-class corporate travel management program with ease. So we put the power for your travelers to have that really kind of that best booking experience around and kind of what I think is an amazing inventory. And also one of the key differentiators for us is that personalized support that travelers need while they're on the go and when they're on the road.
Got it. So is it fair to say, is it like a new kind of corporate travel agency, or is it that plus a software platform? Tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a combination of two things. So our technology is one of the kind of best in class mobile solutions, also desktop. So from a usability perspective, our technology is amazing. But it's the support. So there's kind of the second part of our organization where TripActions actually has support agents all around the world that can call in and also have proactive chat with a TripActions employee to help them through whether it's a canceled flight or a flight that may need to be rerouted. Because, a lot of us know that if you're in a meeting in Chicago and your boss says, head to New York after that, and you're planning to come home, that our support agents can be on call and help you to make those changes.
Cool. Okay. Is it SaaS? Is it recurring revenue, or is it a combination of recurring revenue plus maybe like a transactional fee on the purchase of airfare and things like that?
Yeah, it's a platform that, as many users can be on that platform. So it's not charged by per user, but we do have a trip fee that's actually a per trip fee. So the more that companies use it, it's just a one fee for each one of your employees' trips. So Sam, if you're traveling 3 or 4 times a year, you just pay per trip, a certain fixed fee. And unlike other providers that are out there, when you call into support, it's part of that package and it's part of that fee. It's actually a really low cost. And there's actually a lot of value that you get out of that because, if you're loyal to, let's say, Delta or United, you could actually bring over all of your loyalty programs. So it's just like as if you're booking through, directly through a provider.
Wow. Awesome. And so we were talking about this online, but offline, I mean, the revenue range, it's sort of, how would you describe it?
Yeah, we're approaching the 100 million range, and we think we're going to kind of blow through that. It's really exciting to see where the companies that are on our platform today, they are all not only enjoying our platform, but these are high growth companies as well. So they're continuing to scale and needing more and more travel services throughout their whole ecosystem.
Got it. And so, and then you've raised about 154 million for a Series C company from Lightspeed, Andreessen, and a bunch of others. How big is your organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. I joined over a year ago. We were at about 100 when I joined. That's a total across the organization. A little over, 15 months later, we're approaching 700 employees, and that includes our commercial go-to-market team, our engineering team, and as well as our support ecosystem. And so we have offices all around the world. We're in 8 different offices spread across all the continents.
Wow. What are your, let's stop there for a second, because you've gone from 100 to 700, which is amazing growth. What's your key observations there? Is everything is it working? How have you maintained the culture? If so, how? Talk to us a little bit, because that is, even for high growth companies, that's tremendous.
It is. I mean, it's when you're on the inside, it's very different. And I think the leadership at TripActions is very attuned to the type of growth that we're under. And I think culture here is one of those things that is refreshing for me personally, because I think the values that you have as an organization, it's just not a poster that you put up on a wall and hope that everybody can live by that. When you're scaling as fast as we are, there are these, I think, amazing kind of culture carriers that the leadership, as well as the managers out in the field are bringing to these offices that, as we start building out, our kind of go-to-market and our footprint, we are really focused around, I think not only the customer and the experience, but also like how to scale responsibly in a way that we're measuring all of the things that are important to us as a business. So we're doing something that's really unique, and both our CEO and our co-founder, it feels like they're everywhere. They're always engaging us to do things differently, and really empowering people to obviously make those important decisions and doing the right thing to help the business to move forward and make sure that if it's when we were at 250 employees, really checking in, having social time. When we were at 400 employees, we have obviously we did a big raise, and then we kind of kept going, and we're gonna hopefully in the next month bring the whole company together for the first time, and especially at this size, it's going to be kind of a real interesting time for us.
Are you guys going to go somewhere fun or special?
we like Thailand. That would be amazing.
Or Morocco. Aircall just took everybody to Morocco.
Oh, really? Okay. We were hoping for something exciting like that where we could charter a few planes. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to focus on probably bringing everybody to headquarters. We've got a really nice new space that we've opened up in the last few months, and we're going to bring people in here and have some fun event.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. So you've been, you're head of field operations. Just tell us, how long have you been working in high growth companies, and a little bit about your background, where you're from, what your early career was like, and how we got here.
Yeah, you bet. So I started my career, go back to kind of a time where actually I was in travel, and I had the opportunity to go work for an adventure travel company. And I kind of paused my adult career and went to do something what I thought was actually pretty aspirational and do something fun, where I was guiding and actually operating trips all over the world. So I actually lived abroad for 5 years, running hiking and cycling trips. And I speak a
Ooh.
couple of languages.
Were these
Amazing.
in Europe, South America? Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that, because I'm interested.
Yeah. So I was primarily living in Italy and France. So I was splitting my time between those two countries, but it was jumping off points to go to Ireland, Switzerland, spend a lot of time over in Asia as well. And then in the winters, go down to Chile. So we were always kind of moving around. I lived out of a bag. I was kind of a professional at that. But, being able to be on the road, work in different cultures, meet a lot of really amazing people every week was I think a great gateway to like really understanding, relationships and people and how businesses can work across the board in terms of, what does international look like? What do relationships in business, look like in terms of like how you really, start from ground zero there. So after I did that for several years, I actually moved back to the Bay Area where I'm from and went and ran a sales team locally. And then I decided to go get my MBA and really start thinking more about like, how do I put my skills together in a more formalized way and really, I think, understand kind of, the levers of business. And one of the things that, happened to me when I was in business school is I was actually fortunate enough to go work for Salesforce as a consultant to help them build out a program that they had just started. And seeing how Salesforce started really innovating, their positioning and kind of how they go to market was especially kind of early on over 10 years ago as they were really, before they started their high growth kind of scale, but also before they started acquiring a lot of companies. For me, it was a great kind of experience to be able to see like, what does that kind of machine look like? And then from there, I jumped off and started, I found sales operations, or I think sales operations found me, where I was able to join, quite a few early stage companies that were both, I would say enterprise scale, backed by some, amazing venture firms here in the Bay Area, but also getting into roles that was like, a lot of mentorship from sales leaders and from marketing leaders that really kind of helped me figure out, obviously, what are the key things that we need as a business to be focused on in order to kind of make that high growth mark that a lot of venture firms are looking for in terms of like, is this a company that's going to go 2x, 3x, 4x and really kind of bring a pretty special product to market?
So, natural question here, two-parter. First of all, how early do you think you need to invest in sales operations? At what stage in a company's growth? That's the first part of the question. And then second, I'm always interested to hear how you think it should be positioned to a product-driven founder or CEO, because sometimes they don't quite understand what sales operations is, what it's supposed to do, or why it's necessary at a certain point. So walk us through how we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, great question. Actually, question that's asked often by a lot of friends that are in a similar situation where they're entrepreneurs in their startup. And I think where sales operations should get introduced to an organization is you've got a first time sales leader. You're starting to build out your sales team. You've got a marketing lead that's in and you're really starting to get that kind of commercialization going. And once you kind of see that product market fit and your sales team is seeing traction and there's some good kind of predictability and repeatability, that's when it's time to really start kind of helping that operational or you need to start building that operational foundation to look at your tool stack, be able to start kind of optimizing around your pipeline. Then you start optimizing kind of inside of your pipeline around, how does that lead flow look? What are the kind of the best practices that you need to have between maybe starting to kind of bring on new roles like SDR, where you can look at the inbound and outbound motion to build pipeline. And a lot of those things that, sales operations leaders are starting to, take on in those early stages, is not only helping operationalize that kind of go to market, but also starting to own, teams like an SDR team. And then, looking at what is that handshake once the sales cycle is done, that handshake to kind of implement, or like customer success now is kind of traditionally taking on, that implementation, especially here at TripActions. That's kind of our model. But those are some of the key things that I would advise early stage companies to really start thinking about, is that when do you start seeing those signals, and when is that kind of right time to start looking at it. There'll be some clear pain that will show up in terms of like, I just, it's like you might ask a question like, hey, what's your forecast? What's the pipeline look like? Sales leaders may be asking all their individual reps. It may feel like it's too much. And that's really when you start thinking about having a sales operations role in your organization.
Are there metrics that you mentioned, product market fit, which is a phrase we hear all the time, and you mentioned repeatability. Is there, obviously, revenue itself as a lagging indicator of sales team performance can be looked at as a signal of repeatability, but are there secondary or second order metrics that you're digging in on to establish when repeatability is possible? Is it, number of reps hitting quota? Is it, what do you look at to define repeatability from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, for us, because we're not quite a SaaS organization, we actually look at consumption on the back end. We look at leading indicators. So we actually start seeing, we care about the funnel very much, about number of opportunities that we're bringing in by what channel. So inbound, outbound, and partner. So 3 very common channels. And then as we can see repeatability, we can see, what a conversion rate or win rates look like and time to close. Those are very common metrics that we're looking at all the time. And we look at it by segment because we are actually starting to differentiate our different customers. And then, for us on the consumption side, and that goes back to our business model of, people who are booking on our platform, is we start looking and measuring, how well are they actually, booking their trips, and, if they had a kind of a predictable dollar value of what they were spending in the previous years, are they ahead of that? So there's a very clear set of metrics that we look at throughout the funnel that really help us understand when predictability can start, obviously kind of driving different decisions, and, do we invest more headcount in a certain area?
What's your there's a lot of debate, talking about pipeline and demand generation. There's I don't know if a lot of debate. There's some debate that the SDR function, which was, I don't know if it was invented, but it was popularized right around 2010 when Aaron Ross wrote Predictable Revenue. But now there's some folks that are, or I've heard in certain circles, that are trying to move back towards a full cycle rep. And they're trying to say that reps, have lost the skill of prospecting. And the consequence of that is that, and buyers don't actually like interacting with SDRs or BDRs. What's your perspective on it? How do you think about scaling up? You mentioned, does the SDR team report to you? We're all just interested in demand generation. I'm curious how TripActions looks at it.
Yeah, I think your listeners will probably agree with this, is that every GTM meeting that, you call it a GTM meeting with your demand leader and your sales operations and sales leads, is always tense. I mean, it's one of those, it's a meeting where you're always trying to make sure, who's accountable for building pipeline, right? So SDRs, we see SDRs playing a real critical role and helping kind of identify who the people are in the organization that obviously can help us start the conversation. As a buyer, I respect obviously the role of the SDR. Do I prefer to kind of speak right to the salesperson? Sure, I do, but I also know the SDR is trying to kind of qualify me and also not kind of waste my time as well, because if there's no fit there, and I don't have a real active pain or need to acquire a technology, then, I don't want to kind of, obviously, I don't want them calling me. And, to be honest, just like probably many people listening to this who are buyers, our inbox is flooded, with SDRs who are really trying to get our attention. And so, I think we all appreciate kind of the role that they're trying to play and, and how they're getting creative to actually get our attention. So is it, what kind of medium is it? Is it email? Is it phone call? Is it LinkedIn? Is it, is it through a connection, and their job is really hard today, but I think that there's actually a huge amount of value there because it, ultimately kind of drives awareness. And, a buyer like me, it may not be the right time because I know I've got some things on my roadmap and it's great to kind of understand, what the players are out there in that space that I might be interested in the future.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Certainly that their job is really, really hard. I think sometimes we underappreciate how hard it is, particularly if they're, if they're not having an opportunity to customize or humanize their communications at scale, if they're just being handed a script or a template from marketing and then blasting it out to thousands of people, that can put them in a difficult position. You've talked about sort of operating a business without trending metrics versus static metrics and sort of the difference between trending metrics and static metrics. Tell the listeners, what are those differences? Give us some of your advice on how to run the business from a metrics perspective, particularly if we're thinking about pipeline and conversion ratios, as you mentioned. Just talk to us about the differences between those two types of metrics.
Yeah, I first of all, I love the data that Salesforce is able to give us when it actually becomes kind of a multiplier effect. So if you've got 10 reps, you can really kind of manage the business. But when you get to like 50, metrics really matter, kind of to get your kind of signals that start coming out from forecasting and from pipeline building. So trending metrics. I'm really big into kind of like playing back the tape for, let's say, pipeline through a waterfall or a Sankey diagram. There are a couple of vendors out there that can actually do a really good job at that, but it's tricky. And what I mean by that is that, when you start a month, we actually measure everything in monthly intervals. But you start by looking at, when we came into a given month, what did the pipeline actually look like? And then what did you end up with? And then in between those beginning and ending point, you can actually see the push behavior of your reps. How well did we pull things in from a future month that may have been set for a close date of an opportunity set for a future month? What did we create in intra-month that actually closed? And so those types of things, we can kind of start building some predictability. So the trends are always just so important for us so we can actually start seeing, are we getting better in a certain area? The static metrics are like basically what happens in a given month. So like, how many opportunities did we create? How many deals that we went to close lost and why? All of the kind of the key indicators that would allow us to really understand our business and where we need to improve.
Got it. Waterfalls are super. So you said, let me finish that thought. Waterfalls are super useful, but you said Sankey diagrams. What are Sankey diagrams?
Oh, Sankeys. Yeah. I stumped a vendor the other day about talking about that. It's basically
How do first of all, let's spell it because I don't know. Is it Sanky?
EY. Yeah.
EY.
Yeah,
okay.
Look it up. It's great. It's actually a data scientist named after a data scientist many years ago. Basically, it's like a flow. So it will actually, you have a starting point, and it will show you a visual flow of all of the. Let's say you're looking at your pipeline of, let's say, pipeline, best case, and commit, and that top bar will have commit, and then there will be a flow that will go to the right. And it will show you, of all those deals that you started with, how many actually went to close one, how many still got pushed out, who is still open, or close lost. It's fantastic. It's an ability to kind of visualize right away the flow of your pipeline. And I think it's really important as sales leaders and as sales executives to really understand, like, how things are actually, how things move from quarter or month over month.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of forecasting, what are your best practices there? You mentioned the commit. Is that a human decision when people make a commit that, the reps are making the commit and then the managers are approving it? Always interested in sort of like how you help a CRO or head of sales or head of revenue come to a number that they then report to the CEO and the board. What are your strategies or your tactics there?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. I'm actually kind of like a fan of several methods. One is I think that Salesforce should always be your system of record, and you should look at that and really, I think, double down your efforts with the reps that says, look, this is our sales stages, this is our forecast categories, these are our probabilities, and just have everybody manage that out of Salesforce. So if a deal is sitting in commit, it's commit. And so what we do as a leadership team is I ask every week for our sales leaders to lock in all their deals, make sure that it's set in the right forecast category. And then we allow the rep to give kind of a verbal commit. So it's a combination of what's in commit versus best case. And then the manager will make their call. And then ultimately the sales leader and I will kind of have a leadership call. And so what we're doing is we're starting to kind of triangulate, the final number for the given month or the next month. And then what I do is I actually run another model where I actually have a weighting. So the probability of all of the deals, it's a pretty straightforward, simple approach, but we start looking at of all the deals and their percentages, I just kind of take that value. And what's interesting is that since we started looking at weighting over a year ago, it's actually been really accurate as an endpoint of where the kind of the month is going to produce for us as a business. It's not as sophisticated, just given kind of where we are in the business. There's some other things that I do want to add on in the future, but we're not still there. But there are some other things that I've done in my past where we actually look at reps' ability to kind of call and also holding the reps accountable for when they start a given month or a period, if it's a quarter, and that they need to stay within 10% of their initial forecast.
Mm. If I were to make a commit, do you assign a probability? What percent do you expect of commits to actually happen? Do you expect 100%? Is it 90%? What's your real life experience?
Real life. Yeah. I mean, it's when it's commit, we actually do have a judgment of the individual who may, I like to use the word hope casting, not forecasting.
Happy years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, that's where the kind of the art and the science of forecasting comes in. And also, if there's a deal that we're actually trying to pull in to a given month, we really try to kind of treat that with, I think, kind of a different lens is something that, a lot of sales leaders out there kind of traditionally understand that, those are upside that's going to potentially get us there. But, we typically don't include that in a call, but, just kind of sending a signal that, obviously we're working on it.
Yeah. How early do you think the CRO or the VP of sales needs to let the CEO know if they're worried about the quarterly forecast? And have you any war stories about when that's gone wrong? Because I've certainly seen that go badly wrong sometimes.
Yeah, it's a great question. I really try to work closely with the sales leader, CRO, and CEO to kind of obviously give as early a signal as possible on, hey, listen, we're going into next month or next quarter with a very light pipeline, and give them that next level down detail of saying, hey, here are our key deals. Here's the list of our key deals. A lot of sales leaders, that are out there are obviously very involved in those key deals because those are obviously, executive level. They've probably been engaged at one point in the introductions. And I think a best practice obviously is, at least a quarter out. If, our business a month out, it's usually too late because obviously our sales cycle is longer than 30 days. So we try to look 2 months out to obviously kind of raise any sort of signals. And that's really kind of, it just depends on the business. I mean, there's a couple of, I wouldn't say war stories, but, I was sitting with a executive team during a QBR, and we were looking at an international leader who was selling, and he had been struggling for 3 quarters in a row, and he was kind of talking about his next quarter and saying this isn't a good one, but the next one's going to be amazing. And I had just returned from being in France, sitting with him and doing a deal inspection along with our VP of Corp Dev. And we put the phone on mute. We said, give him one more quarter. And sure enough, that fifth quarter, he blew it out.
Nice.
And I think that's like, part of like, sales ops role is like to go and spend the time and, really start swarming, deals or at least regions or something that may need, more time, but also just, try to build the trust in the business to say, hey, listen, our forecasting works, our deal management works, our inspection works. If you trust the individual on the other side that they're doing the right things and they've got the right activities, you can tell the CRO, hey, here's our confidence in terms of like things are going to not be good for the board. So let's send that right signal now, and then have obviously an action plan in place to obviously remedy and when we're going to kind of pick that up.
Yeah. Well, I love in this example that this, I don't know if they were French, but they were in France, but this person blew it out of the water for the fifth quarter. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, they were French.
Très joli.
Yes.
You've talked about how managers often have difficulty analyzing, as I forget who said this, maybe it was Thomas Paine, to see what is in front of one's nose often requires great difficulty. But, the point is, managers often have information right in front of them, but they don't have the tools to analyze the data in a way that makes it actionable for them. How do you address this problem? And what are how do you implement a data-driven approach within an organization when managers might not be so inclined?
Yeah, it's a great question. Managers just don't have time to do the data analysis, right? So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about us and sales operations or business analytics. We're actually standing up a function to really help drive that, but give them very prescriptive metrics for how they should enable their kind of one-on-ones with their reps that are out there in the field. And it's basically all levels of the organization. So the sales organization. So you have your frontline managers, then you have your RVPs, and then you have your sales leadership, right? And each one of them should have a certain set of core metrics that give them the right visibility in terms of actually what's happening. And so I think Salesforce, the data that does come out of it obviously is kind of the data everybody's managing and measuring. But there are other tools that are out there, like a Looker or a Tableau or, some of these other tools that are out there that can really help us give them the right kind of dashboards for them to look at. But what you're trying to do is while you give them that data, you're also reading back to them a set of, problem areas for them to investigate. Hey, your, rep A is always been really solid doing this one metric, but like they seem to be behind. What's up? Time to dig in there. And so that is one of the most kind of powerful things that we're really trying to do. We're very constrained in terms of giving everybody kind of that that level of analysis. And so the question is, do we actually do it here, or can I bring in somebody who can help drive more of that insight for the managers or frontline managers?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Random question: Are you on Salesforce? Are you on Salesforce Classic or Lightning?
So we're Classic.
They're going to make you switch, right?
Yeah. Don't we all have to go to Lightning?
I use HubSpot. I'm not even on Salesforce.
Lucky you. Yeah, it's funny. It's like it's the hot topic when we're talking through. Same question. Going to Lightning. I think we're starting to scope that out.
Makes sense. Cool. When you think about, I guess the follow-on question, what else is in your tech stack? You don't have to name specific vendors if you feel self-conscious, but what are the tools? You've talked a lot about how, tools can't solve the problem. So what tools do you think are critical when you look at driving efficiency and performance within the sales team? And to the point of you mentioned Looker and Tableau, and maybe there's Insight Squared, but are you using analytics platforms that sit on top of Salesforce, or are you building all of that within Salesforce? Maybe you have the ability to put that stuff together. Maybe you've got somebody that's a Salesforce engineer. How do you think about your tech stack when it comes to enablement and productivity?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, we have a really healthy tech stack. When I came in, we were actually like pulling Salesforce out of the shrink wrap. So we've really been building things out of, from the foundation and ground up. But there are things that I think are critical. So you gotta, what I do is I look at I think of each function and what they need. So our sales development team definitely need an emailing tool. We need prospecting tools. So we're literally building our database overnight. And how do we help self-service and then also kind of operationalize adding data? So there's a bunch of tools for kind of our SDRs to be able to go out and pursue those folks. Then there's the enablement piece. So call recording functionality has been massive for us, where we really need to kind of learn not only kind of like how our sellers are selling, but it's a great coaching tool for our managers. We actually have a manager who listens to every single one of her team's calls on Sunday night before she gets in the office, so she knows actually how to manage their team. So it could not I think live without that. I would say, when you start thinking kind of more broadly about kind of the ecosystem on the metrics piece, we actually have something, we have a technology that sits on top of Salesforce and also our Google apps that help us kind of build other signals, because we know that, emails that go out of Gmail and calendar invites aren't always logged as activities. And so this tool kind of catches that, but also alerts our leaders on things and behaviors that aren't kind of actually tracking in the right direction. And then, it goes all the way through to some other kind of technologies that we're building in around, we're starting to see a lot of RFPs in our sales cycle, and how do we automate that? And I think, one of the things that we are doing as a business is we've got this amazing tribal knowledge. What the hell do you do with all that tribal knowledge, right? So it's as you share it across the business, you got to actually organize it and structure it in a really good way. So we've got, a technology that does that. We also need to have a content management that product marketing team can have as kind of the source of truth. So it's not just the organic knowledge, but it's the more kind of structured knowledge. And then finally, we're starting to really look at our learning management system and be able to kind of bring that on. So they're very structured around knowledge and empowering, obviously our sales team across the org, not only as they're onboarding, but, constantly evolving on the ongoing education and really kind of trying to package that in a very, hopefully elegant way.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, so much is happening. So it's really exciting time for all these tools. Just you got to make sure we train our reps the right way and train the people that work at the companies the right way, or else they won't be used, which is not what we want.
And that's what my VP of finance always says. Are you guys using all that?
And the answer is sort of.
Yeah, try it. If he's listening, it's yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course we are, Mr. or Ms. VP of Finance. David, we're coming to the end of our time together, and this is the part in the conversation where we like to pay it forward. We like to figure out who are the people that have influenced you, who are the people that you look up to. So when you think about great revenue leaders, great founders, tell us, who are your influences? Who should we be aware of?
Yeah, so I had a fortunate experience working with a CMO who, I've learned a lot with and had a great kind of partnership. And I think, we think about, sales operations, it just isn't the sales leader all the time. And I've had an amazing kind of slew of sales leaders that I've learned from. But a CMO that I've loved to work for, his name's Jed Ayers.'s at iGel. And I worked with him when I was at AppSense, building an amazing organization over there. And, one of the other kind of founders that, I think is doing some awesome work out there is Rory Ronnie over at Chorus. I think when you start thinking about, it's not just the partnership piece, it's about the human stuff as well. I think he's just done a fantastic job engaging with me and being kind of a thought partner on some stuff. And I think, you asked me this question about like investor. I actually had a great opportunity to meet Peter Fenton when I was at Lithium. He's a Benchmark. And he came in and he told us this like hilarious story about his opportunity to either invest in Friendster or Facebook. And we were all like, oh my God. And he went with Friendster. And we all just obviously got a good laugh at that. But, he has been such an amazing kind of, I would say, just his vision and, some of his recommendations have really helped a lot of what I did early in my career in those decisions.
Awesome. Yeah, Roy is great. By the way, Roy took the whole team to Barcelona. So
he did.
Yeah, he did.
He's now a customer, so we'll get him on that.
Exactly. So, David, great talking to you. If folks want to reach out to you, is that okay? Maybe they want to learn about sales ops, or revenue ops, or growth ops, or they want to work at TripActions. So, what's the best way to reach you if you're open to it?
Yeah, absolutely. My LinkedIn is always open. I love when people reach out. Always happy to mentor. Like one of the things that I love doing, as you said earlier, pay it forward and pay it back. And or they could just reach me simply at TripActions. It's just DZ. That's kind of like how I'm known, is DZ@tripactions.com.
Oh, that's an awesome email address. Mazel on that one. Nice job.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for being on the show. We're going to talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals. And thanks so much for being a guest on the Sales Hacker podcast.
Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Hey everybody, it's Sam's Corner, another fantastic interview with David Zwerin, Head of Field Operations at TripActions, a fast-growing company that's revolutionizing the way that people book corporate travel. And certainly I'm excited about that potentially because I will need to preserve my platinum status on Delta so that I can board ahead of you. Just kidding. David talked about a lot of interesting and important points. I think sales ops is an underappreciated, underrepresented function. I think CEOs and founders often don't know why you need to invest in operations. And the reality is that you need infrastructure if you're going to scale. And so David talked about this concept of once you have repeatability, you can begin to invest in operations as a means of growing and scaling the sales organization. They went from 100 people to 700 people, which is that's a lot of hiring. So, and they're still hitting their targets, which is really, really encouraging. We talked about how do you forecast, and triangulation is the word that comes to mind most often when people are talking about forecasting. You have your human inputs, which is what we call the commit. And that's when the salesperson is sort of putting their hand to God and swearing on the Bible or, the holy document or literary tome of their choice. And perhaps if they're agnostic or an atheist, they choose to swear on nothing. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. Stop obsessing about anyway, I'm rambling. The point is this: the commit is when you make a commitment that you're going to close that deal, but inevitably those deals still only close about 80 or 90% of the time. So you want a human grounds up approach, a bottoms-up approach, where all of the humans, all of the salespeople, and the account executives and their managers are all aggregating all of the deals that they think are at a high probability at XYZ stage or later in the sales process and saying these are going to close. And then you want to bring a different approach to it, which is you want to just bring a pure probability weighting against the different stages of the sales cycle, against your sales cycle. And make sure that that top-down approach, which is taking, if it's at intro call, it'll be 20% or 10%, and if it's at demo or demo, it's great teams close at 40%, bad teams close at 20-25%. It really depends when you create the opportunity. If it's in legal, it's supposed to close 70 to 75, 80, 85% of the time. So you're doing a top-down forecast and a bottoms-up forecast, and you're comparing those two numbers, and then you're presenting them back to, up to the senior management. Something else that's just super, super important, a good friend of mine says, bad news doesn't get better with time. And that is the truth. I've seen a lot of sales leaders get fired because they bring the bad news too late, because they're crossing their fingers that there's a couple key deals that are going to come in right before the end of the quarter or end of the month. And then they'll throw that into the results deck that'll go up to the board meeting, and the CEO will present it to the board, and everything will be hunky-dory. And hope is not a strategy. If you're crossing your fingers, let's call those deals let's not commit those deals. They're not going to come in. And we got to look at what actually is in the pipeline and what's actually going to close. And so the minute that you think you're not going to hit that number, gosh darn it, you better say something. And you got to do it calmly. You can't make it like a 5-alarm fire every single time, but you do have to let people know all the time, as early as you know. And frankly, I appreciate that, certain VCs and certain people think that, sales leaders and commercial leaders are sandbaggers, meaning we under-promise and over-deliver. But gosh darn it, under-promise and over-deliver is the way that you can get promoted, that you can keep your job. And that starts with, if you're a new sales leader entering a new role at a new company, what's the one thing that you are not allowed to do? You are not allowed to accept their existing forecast. What you have to do, what you must do as part of your negotiation at any VP level or above, is you must say, listen, I appreciate that you have your numbers. I need to get into the pipeline. I need to dig into the numbers. And then I will present to you after 30 days some kind of sense for what I think the forecast will actually be. Otherwise, they're going to sign you up to some massive number. You're going to get there. There's going to be no pipeline and no opportunity. And your demand gen function isn't going to be fully built out or robust. And you're going to be facing an awful miss. And that'll be on your shoulders. So we don't want that to happen. So at any rate, the main thing we were talking about just now is just pipeline and forecasting. Get good at forecasting and provide bad news as quickly as possible in a calm and measured way up through senior management, because you don't want it to be that 2 days before the board meeting, you're telling everybody that you're going to miss by 30%. That is a recipe for getting fired. Now, that's been Sam's Corner. Thanks so much for listening. Listen, if you haven't rated the Sales Hacker podcast on iTunes and given us 5 stars, why haven't you? Please do that. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at linkedin.com/in and then /Sam F. Jacobs. If you want to hear more about our sponsors, those people are Conga, the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite, and Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. I will talk to you next time.